Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
It's only a kick, a jump, a block. It's only a serve. It's only a tackle, a run. It's only for the fans. After all, it's only pressure. You got this. Adidas.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Stephen Krajcik of the Lotto Jumbo team as well, and Adam Yates of Orica Green Edge, and Anthony Turgis, who had a little bit of a tumble as he headed in towards Scarborough but stayed on his bike. Great Britain have won their first medal. It was Adam Peaty in a world record time, breaking his own world record. She punches the air and she crosses that blue finish line. The world champion of 12 months ago, who finished second here last time around, has won it.
The athletes' village is not a place for fighting. I've never heard that ever in Olympic and Paralympic history.
This is Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic podcast covering the games all the time, rather than once every 4 years. I'm John.
And I'm Michael, and coming up in this episode, the decision is... No decision for now from the International Olympic Committee. I'm talking about Russia and Belarus.
Again, yes, we ask also if we're beginning to see effects of a 3-year Olympic cycle on athletes as Adam Peaty pulls out of this summer's British Swimming Championships and World Trials.
And we'll have our news from the games. We've got more athletics, more judo, more tennis, and more para-swimming.
As ever, you can let us know what you think and get in touch anytime at AnythingButF on Twitter, or message us on Insta and Facebook. We're on our website, anythingbutfooty.com, or email anythingbutfooty@gmail.com. So no decision as yet from the International Olympic Association on the participation of Russia and Belarus athletes at Paris 2024 and Milano Cortino 2026, the Winter Games. Let's hear first from the main man himself, Olympic President Thomas Bach.
We are not waiting. I guess we all, would like the war to end now, and this is what we are calling for. And there, the question which has been discussed in many of these consultations is. Why should what is possible in all these sports not be possible in swimming, table tennis, wrestling, or any other sport? What is the difference?
Thomas Bach speaking at the IOC Executive Board that's been taking place this week. And of course it follows Lord Coe's decision from World Athletics that athletes from those countries would be banned from his sport. Bach also said that any governments interfering were deplorable, and he did slightly toughen up the criteria for neutral athletes, something we suggested in our last episode with links to the army and supporting Putin. Michael, a really tough week in the world of Olympic sport.
Yeah, and do you know what? We're getting mixed messages, aren't we, from the IOC and from different sports. We had quite a tough hardline decision from World Athletics and Lord Coe a fortnight ago. This week, we've had 300 fencers who have written to Thomas Bach and the president of the International Fencing Federation, urging them to reconsider allowing fencers from Russia and Belarus to compete in Paris. And now this decision, or no decision, as we've said right at the start of the podcast, from the International Olympic Committee. It hasn't surprised me that the IOC have not gone as far as other sports, because as we know, the IOC will never be rushed into making a decision, and they will look at what they've got 15 months still to play with, if you like, towards Paris 2024, even longer for Milan and Cortina in 2026. They will hope that there might be some bigger geopolitical resolution in those 15 months. That's certainly what we were hearing there from Thomas Bach. Of course, we all hope that the war ends, and they hope that that will then bring about some kind of resolution in terms of the world of elite sport and then something for the Olympic Games. But I think it's quite important just to state here that this was not a talking shop, a board meeting this week about Paris and about Milan Cortina. These were not decisions that were being made about the Olympic Games per se. This is just decisions that are being talked about at the moment in terms of a return to international sport. So whilst there are some implications for Paris in 2024, and I think, if you like, this is a little bit of a test case. I think Thomas Bach was using this as a bit of an exercise, a focus group, if you like, to see what the reaction was to this decision. So the pathway is there for athletes from Russia and Belarus to come back, to compete as neutrals. No teams, no one that's served in the military, no one that has openly supported the war will be allowed to compete. But some athletes might be allowed to compete. And I think what Thomas Bach is doing here is dipping his toe in the water, seeing what the international reaction to that was, because I think we know that his idea and his ideal and his perfect solution would be to have athletes from Russia and Belarus in Paris, whether the war is ongoing or not, there as neutral athletes. I think we know that ideally for him, he would have athletes from those two countries still competing.
I think the interesting thing that I looked through, and you mentioned about the fencers writing to the IOC, if you look at the nationalities of the fencers, and it's something that we touched upon in our last episode about how the West sees this war slightly different. I say the West in inverted commas. The West sees this war slightly different from maybe the rest of the world. And again, I think it's right that these athletes from fencing stand up and say, we're not happy with this and we don't want it to happen. But they're all from nations that are in Europe. I think there were some Australians in there as well. But they're all of a Western origin. And I think unless you can get the whole world supporting these claims, not to say that those claims aren't relevant, it's not going to change the position that you've so expertly put out of where the IOC is at the moment. And I think the other thing that Thomas Bach said in those press conferences, and he did 3 during the week, as I said, it's been a really interesting week to hear his views. He said there are 70 other armed conflicts going on around the world at the moment. I think he mentioned Ethiopia. I think he mentioned Syria. Why are these countries not being treated, or potentially saying as neutral athletes as well? And that also then brings up double standards questions. So why are you treating Russia and Belarus by saying they have to be neutral, to why Syria, Ethiopia can still take part, even though there are conflicts going on there? And he actually said to a question that it was because Russia and Belarus had broken the Olympic truce. Because don't forget, this all happened between the Winter Olympics and the Winter Paralympics, where there is a truce declared, and everyone always saw it very much as a statement, whether anyone really believed it. Obviously, Putin didn't believe it and went in to invade Ukraine. But that truce has always been there. So that is one of the reasons why the sanctions are in place and why they are looking at Russia and Belarusian athletes slightly differently. What did you make, Michael, of his comment that, look, it's working in tennis, so why can't it work in Olympic sport?
Well, I think he is probably looking for any evidence from anything he can find at the minute which would support the view within the IOC and his personal view, which is that he wants athletes from Russia and Belarus to be in Paris and to be in Milan Cortina. And yes, other sports have athletes from those countries competing at the moment. He cited, obviously, there's not been any sort of serious issues or major conflicts around those. And it will be interesting to see what, Wimbledon do this year. As we know, they banned athletes from those countries last year, and the tournament took a hit because of it, because obviously ranking points and everything else were then made not available to the people that competed in the All England Championship. So I think we will probably take on a little bit of a watching brief as to what happens in some of those other sports. But I think, like everything, you can always find the evidence to support your viewpoint
Yes.
if you look hard enough for it. And I think that is what Thomas Bach has done here. I think that the fencers writing is an interesting one because, of course, Bach was a gold medalist in fencing in Montreal in 1976. So that is his own sport, if you like, turning on him. And I think that the bigger thing is now, obviously, it means that there's a pathway for athletes from those countries to start trying to qualify for the Games. And I go back to what Dame Catherine Granger, the chair of UK Sport, says to us said to us in the 50th episode of Great British Bosses, which from an athlete point of view, you just want to know. And those athletes will now begin qualification. And let's put this hypothetical situation out there. You finish 17th in a qualification competition. The top 16 go to Paris for the Games. One of those in the 16 is from Russia or Belarus and will go as an independent athlete. What do you do in that situation as an athlete? Do you stop your training and start refocusing and think, right, LA 2028 for me? Or do you carry on training with the view that, well, they might be kicked out at some point over the next 15 months and I might still get my place in the Games? From an athlete's point of view, and that is what Thomas Bach will always say he puts at the centre of every decision the IOC ever makes, from an athlete point of view, it is a very difficult situation at the moment.
And lots of allegations, they kick the can down the road. You said they won't make this decision anytime soon. I think Thomas Bach said in the last press conference that it won't be before the year to go anniversary. I think he jokingly said, it felt a bit slightly inappropriate at the time, he jokingly said to a journalist, you can go on holiday, you won't be called back by your editor to cover the fact that we are deciding on Russia and Belarusian athletes. So he was telling a joke, but I'm not sure sometimes telling jokes in press conferences when you're talking about war and conflicts is necessarily the best thing to do. But you know, that was his way of dealing with it. And I think it does show that they want to see how it goes. They want to give it as much time as possible. But I thought you made a really good point. You've done a few hits with TalkSport this week about it as you're the Olympics correspondent. And they don't make decisions quickly anyway, do they? You brought up the whole COVID-19 situation before Tokyo.
Yeah, I mean, they were, as I think the phrase they used, while the world was sort of locking down and shutting down, the IOC was still maintaining that the Tokyo Olympics were going to take place on schedule with full crowds in 2020, when that was becoming very apparent to everybody that it was not going to happen in 2020. It was not going to happen in the summer. It was not going to happen with full crowds. And I think whilst the rest of the world had wised up to that, the IOC was still maintaining this premise that it would. They did eventually come around, and as we know, they postponed the Games and they put it on in 2021 behind closed doors, as it were, as a television event as opposed to a spectator event. Now, they made those decisions probably with about 5-6 months to go. It would not surprise me if we go down to 5-6 months to go, maybe even closer, over a final decision about athletes in Russia and Belarus. And we've spoken about it before on the podcast. I think it depends a lot on what happens in Ukraine over the next year or so, and how, you know, the situation there plays out, and what the world view and world opinion on that is. And we've spoken, haven't we, about the way the news agendas move on very quickly. I think at the moment, from that Western point of view, that Western viewpoint, Ukraine is still very high up in our news agenda. I think because we see it as a conflict in Europe, and we are speaking in Europe, it's something that is very much in focus for us. But elsewhere around the world, maybe not so. And that's what we need to always consider with the IOC, is it's a global body. It's not a European, it's not a Western European body. It's certainly not a British body. And you mentioned, of course, as well, there's been other things going on in Lausanne, 3 days of board meetings. The IOC also took the decision this week to reallocate some medals, diplomas and medalist pins from the Olympic Games of London 2012. We're still talking 11 years on about reallocating medals from 2012.
That is really bad. I mean, you talked about athletes not qualifying potentially because Russians were ahead of them while they're trying to qualify for these games. But these athletes have waited 11 years to then get a gold medal because of effectively cheating Russians because of drug cheats.
Yeah, in the women's 20k race walk at London 2012, the first placed athlete has been disqualified. So that gold medal has now been reallocated to Shenji Yang of China. And in the women's 400 metres hurdles event at London 2012, the first placed athlete was disqualified again. So that gold medal has now been reallocated to Lashinda Dimas of the US.
So at the Olympic Park in London, going to have to go round and change all the medal tiles that have the gold medal winners on the tiles in the
and then the
in
silver
Olympic
and
Park.
the bronze.
Yeah. And 11 years on. Just to finish with, you mentioned the fact that they were making lots of announcements. They have said that Russia can come back and compete. The whole McLaren report that we knew happened after Sochi, the system, state-sponsored doping, the bans. Like World Athletics, they have said that the Russians now are, they've proved that they are putting processes in place for clean athletes, so they can be welcomed back from a drug point of view. But then the whole Ukraine war obviously impacts on that as well. Just two final points I'd like to make on the whole Russia, Ukraine, Belarus point. And I think it's what Thomas Bach is it needs to be aware of and what we need to see. He said there were no incidents, no issues with what was going on. Remember in the Australian Open when the Russian flags were in the stadiums?
Yep.
So neutral athletes, but the Russian flags were still there. Even pictures of Djokovic's dad with a Russian flag. Now he didn't know anything about it, but that's what sometimes happens when you make these decisions. And I think Catherine Granger said the same thing to us, that it doesn't really work. Neutrality doesn't really work. So I think that's worth keeping an eye on and seeing how that impacts on it. And the second point, and it's on the intro to the new music of our podcast, where don't forget in Beijing, the Paralympic Association had to interject and had to change their mind about allowing Russian athletes to compete after that invasion on Ukraine because, quote, there was serious concerns about the athletes' village and fighting in the athletes' village. And you can say, why, if it's working in tennis, why wouldn't it work in the Olympics? The difference is with the Olympics is that all the athletes stay in one place together in an athletes' village. In all these other sporting events around the world, they're all in different hotels and different team hotels. And really, they probably only come and see each other when they come to the start line or on the court and the pitch. Are they two fair points that Thomas Bach and the IOC should be aware of?
Absolutely. Also with the Olympics, you've got 10,500 athletes pretty much all staying in that village as well. Yeah. So, that is a much bigger setup than any tennis tournament or any football tournament that might be taking place at the moment, where, as you say, teams are staying in individual complexes, individual hotels, or individuals are staying in their individual hotels. Yeah, the Olympics is very much a different setup from those types of events. So, yeah, that is something that they will need to bear in mind. And as I said right at the start, I just think this is something that Thomas Bach is just going to wait and see on. And this, I think, is their first viewpoint, their first sort of public statement on it. They're going to see how it lands. They're going to see what the reaction is to it. And they will, I think, enhance and fettle their viewpoint over the next few months, I think, to get to the point where we hope at the end is the right decision.
This is Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic podcast. Stay with us. We've got our news from the games to come.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
This is Anything But Footy, and still to come, our latest news from the games. But first, Michael, we don't know whether the Russians will be at Paris 2024, and there now seems some uncertainty about the place of two-time Olympic champion Adam Peaty, after a statement this week on social media saying he was pulling out of the British Swimming Championships that acts as trials for the World Championships later this summer. He says he's not enjoying the sport after struggling with mental health over the last few years, and he did say he was putting all his focus on Paris, but I wonder whether it shows the strain our athletes are under. And it's not the first time that we've heard from British athletes who've won gold medals, even a short time ago in Tokyo, that you would expect to be going to Paris just a few years later.
Yep, I mean, you've got GB hockey goalkeeper Maddie Hinch, who's also called time on her brilliant Olympic career. We've also had the retirement of Aileen McIntyre from sailing that we mentioned. And we've only just seen the return of three-time Olympic gymnastic champion Max Whitlock as well, following his successes in Tokyo. So we are seeing a changing of the Team GB guard. But I think the bigger point there and the bigger issue is this idea of hosting 2 Summer Olympic Games in 3 years, the pressure that has brought. And I think we also underestimate perhaps the pressure that the delay made. So having had a 5-year cycle where athletes were, when that postponement was announced, athletes were in very much their final preparation stage. They were a few months out from the Games, and they were then forced to pause in difficult circumstances, as the whole world was. They were, in many respects, taken out of their usual environments and their usual training camps and their usual support teams. And as we know, we saw the likes of Adam Peaty, training at home, and Max Whitlock training at home. And I know that we did get elite athletes back training quite quickly, certainly in the UK, and some of the restrictions for elite athletes were sort of limited down a little bit from where they were for recreational sports people. But I do wonder what the effect of that having to go again for another year. And then the knock-on from that is, if you're an Olympic athlete, elite athlete, you go to the Games, the year after the Games is kind of a decompression year. You might compete, you might take part in a few things, but on the whole, it's a very quiet year for you. But I think when you came back from Tokyo as a medalist or a finalist, or, just having been part of Team GB, what you were knowing is that you were 3 years from the next one. So there wasn't that time to have that year out. And I know we saw it with Max Whitlock, took some time out. Tom Daley is still taking some time out, it would appear, as we edge closer to Paris. But yeah, I think it will be very interesting. And I'm sure, the powers that be at bodies like UK Sport will be doing all the research on this. It will be very interesting, I think, to look back in a few years, just to what mental and what physical toll the delay took on some of our leading athletes.
Now, you spoke to Adam Peaty quite a lot last summer, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But looking like Maddie Hinch, for example, to retire less than, it's just over a year before the Games, it would surprise a lot of people. But I think the points that you make are absolutely right. Me and you, and everybody else who's an Olympic fan, hopefully listening to this podcast, is excited that there are 2 Olympic Summer Games in 3 years. But actually, that excitement for an athlete, as you've rightly explained, means that there's so much more pressure on them to perform at events in between. And we saw Maddie Hinch win, of course, with England at the Commonwealth Games as well last year at Birmingham. And that's where you met Adam Peaty as well. And I mean, for him to say he's not enjoying the sport, I mean, you were effectively saying that last summer when you were speaking to him.
Yeah, I asked him that question directly. Are you enjoying yourself? And I think I interviewed Adam on maybe 5 or 6 consecutive days during the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, and he was up and down. He really was up and down, and that's what as was his form. Yeah, and he was up and down with his form, as you say, and he was up and down in his responses to the questions he was being asked about his form. And that's what prompted me to actually say, because I know from having covered the Tokyo Games how much pressure he felt he was under. And I know that he used that platform to talk about his mental health and the mental health of others quite a lot during the Olympic Games. So that is what got me to the point where I actually just asked him straight out, are you enjoying this, Adam? Because at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, and you are an Olympic swimmer who is having to make every decision in your life, literally every decision in your life, is a decision being made because of your job. So you're making a decision, do I get up from this sofa now and walk to the kitchen and make myself a cup of tea and expel that energy? Or do I stay here and hope that someone brings me that cup of tea because I need that refueling?
Yeah.
Everything you're doing when you're preparing for an Olympic Games, when you are at the level of someone like Adam Peaty, every decision you're making is pretty much based around performance. And I just didn't get the impression that he was enjoying his performance. I didn't get the impression he was enjoying being part of the team. I didn't get the impression he was enjoying the event in Birmingham last year. So it's not come as a huge shock to me that here we are, not quite a year on from Birmingham and the Commonwealth Games, to see him make this decision. Because I just don't think he had been enjoying his swimming for quite some time. And also, you've got to put yourself in his shoes, if you like, and think he has achieved so much in the sport. He has taken the sport to a different level. To then try and go again and to try and improve again and get better. I mean, how much more can Adam Peaty give to the sport of swimming? He's been an absolutely phenomenal, outstanding, first-class athlete in everything he's done, both in the swimming pool and, you know, what he's been able to use his platform outside the pool in terms of talking about things like mental health and trying to normalise conversations around mental health. It must be so difficult for him to keep coming back and doing that year on year on year. And the other thing I would just say, and we don't know what is in the mindset of some of these athletes. The people that we've named there, people like Ailey McIntyre, Maddie Hinch, they as will have a plan. As athletes, they will live and die by that 4-year cycle of the Olympics. It then got upset. It may be that they have plans to go and begin a new job, to study, to start a family. We don't know. We don't know what was going through these people's minds. But all those kind of considerations must come into it. They then had to put those considerations on hold to go again for another year. And then, as we say, that impact. So, you know, what Maddie Hinch, what Ailey McIntyre, what Adam Peaty goes on and does now, we'll have to wait and see. But, you know, they will have had a plan, and their plan would have said 2020 Tokyo and then possibly 2024 Paris. And it didn't pan out like that, and it didn't happen like that for them. And that, I think, is what we're seeing now.
Absolutely. And just finally on Peaty, I wonder whether him becoming a father has an impact on his swimming career.
Absolutely.
As well. It's a conversation we would have if he was a female. So I'm going to say the same thing. When I became a father, it changed me, and it changed my outlook on life. And we know that he wasn't expecting to become a father. He became a father. My understanding is he's no longer with his partner now either. And so that must have an impact on him as well, about getting up every morning and, as you say, trying to do something different when you've already achieved everything that you have achieved as well. So we wish him well, Adam Peaty. It goes without saying, doesn't it, that we wish him all the best. And I think he will be back in Paris. But if he's not, then he still had an amazing, as you say, absolutely outstanding Olympic career.
Yeah, and let's not, underline the career that he's had, because I think he still has so much more to give. You and I meet a lot of these elite athletes quite a lot in the line of our work, and you just get a vibe, you just get a feeling, don't you, from some, that you know that beyond their sport, they have more to give. We would have said it about Dame Catherine Granger in 2012. We would have said, Dame Catherine Granger is not going to retire from rowing and disappear. We know that she is going to come and do some other brilliant, tremendous things in the world of sport, which is what she's doing in terms of that culture change at UK sport with the medals and more strategy. And I think we would both agree. We probably said it about Kate Richardson-Walsh, for example. Again, another athlete that we knew that when she hung up the hockey stick would have more to give in the world of sport and beyond sport. and I certainly think that Adam Peaty goes into that category.
Absolutely. It's flying by once again, our podcast. We better round up our news of the games. And British duo Charlotte Purdue and Jess Piasecki, along with Tiskit Assefa of Ethiopia, the Berlin 2022 marathon champion, have been forced to withdraw from the elite women's race at this year's London Marathon, which takes place Sunday, April 23rd. Unfortunately, they all have injuries. Michael will be there to cover it. We think that Ailish McColgan is still on schedule for that. And Natasha Cockram, meantime, is the first Great Britain and Northern Ireland athlete selected for the 2023 World Athletics Championships in Budapest in Hungary in August. Congratulations to her. The Welsh athlete ran the 6th fastest time ever by a British woman at the Valencia Marathon in December 2022, clocking 2 hours 26:14.
And you might have seen this rather strange story in Time Sport, written by Matt Lawton and Rick Broadbent, two of their leading writers. Rick is their athletics correspondent. Matt is a general correspondent who has, like us, the brief around Olympic and Paralympic sport. And they reported that Laura Muir and Gemma Reekie flew home from a training camp after a bust-up with their coach Andy Young. They were both in South Africa, 15 months until the Paris Olympics. Originally, details about the falling out were unclear. Andy Young was quoted in some subsequent articles saying there wasn't a bust-up. The pair were concerned about his health and felt he wasn't looking after himself properly. There's been further reports, which have been released just as we are recording this episode of Anything But Footy, suggesting the fallout was after the coach stopped them visiting a coffee shop and they had to walk over a mile for a drink. Sources, an interesting word, close to the coach and the athlete, have said that this was the tipping point rather than an isolated incident. It's rather curious. As I said, with just over a year to go to the Games, we know about Laura Muir's success, Gemma Reekie, another Team Scotland athlete as well, and Laura Muir and Andy Young have had a terrific partnership. So we'll wait to see whether they can be reconciled or whether Laura Muir and Gemma Reekie find a new coach.
The British gymnastics lineup for the 2023 European Artistic Gymnastics Championships has been confirmed in Turkey for April, the 11th to the 16th. Aforementioned Max Whitlock returns to international competition after his break, alongside Commonwealth and World medalists from last year, Jake Jarman and Courtney Tulloch. And world champion Jessica Gadarova, Alice Kinsella, Odine Achangpong and Georgia May Fenton are also joined by Becky Downey, who returns to Great British action and looking to impress again on the big stage. Good to have her back.
Judo, number 1 seed Lucy Renshaw showed her ranking is spot on with success in a recent Grand Slam event. She dominated the competition. It is her 6th career Grand Slam title. I think judo is going to be a big sport for Team GB in Paris. I think there'll be medals there.
You've said that twice now, so we're making a note of that, Michael. Ready for...
Have I said that twice?
Yeah. So
I said that in the last one, did I?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I believe it.
I don't know, exactly, but we're making a note of it. We definitely know your prediction is there. Now, a 28-strong British team has been selected for the Manchester 2023 Para Swimming World Championships. Great that Manchester is staging that. It takes place from July 31st to the 6th of August, and the likes of Grace Harvey and Maisie Summers-Newton lead the team.
It's a difficult one for me, this, because as you know, I've been banging the drum for Yorkshire in the Commonwealth Games bid, but across the Pennines, it's all about Manchester at the moment, the Para Swimming World Championships, and now the LTA has confirmed Manchester's AO Arena will be the new host of the group stages of the Davis Cup finals later this year, the 5th different city to host the Davis Cup in Britain over the last 10 years, joining Coventry, Glasgow, London and Birmingham. British number 1 Cameron Norrie, Dan Evans, Jack Draper and Andy Murray will all compete at Queen's this summer. The LTA Cinch Championships in June. The doubles draw will feature current ATP doubles number 1 Neil Skupski, Joe Salisbury, Lloyd Glasspool and Jamie Murray. British wheelchair duo of Alfie Hewitt and Gordon Reid will also be returning to Queen's.
A reminder that Queen's is a men's tournament. That's why we haven't mentioned some of the British women in that. I'm sure their announcements will be where they will be playing ahead of Wimbledon. Can't wait for the tennis season to start. You know it's one of my favourite sports, Michael, as ever.
And as ever, you can get in touch with us at Anything But F on Twitter. You can message us on Instagram or on Facebook. Find us online, anythingbutfooty.com, or drop us an email, anythingbutfooty@gmail.com.
So we know Michael's made a decision that judo is one to watch for Team GB at Paris 2024. We still await the big decision, though, from the International Olympic Committee on Russia, Belarus and Ukraine.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.